Take a walk around London, scarcely an indigenous person in sight or earshot. Mass migration has been a disaster for Britain. It's time to cut the numbers. The UK has experienced a significant rise in immigration in recent years, causing widespread unrest and sparking an anti-immigration backlash. In June 2023, the number of immigrants to the UK was approximately 1.2 million, while 508,000 people emigrated, resulting in a net migration of 675,000. This reflects an increasing trend from an already ridiculous net migration figure of 600,000 recorded in the previous year. The majority of immigrants arriving in the UK were non-EU nationals, accounting for 968,000 of the total. These immigrants consist of 253,000 Indians, 55,000 Pakistanis, 141,000 Nigerians, 89,000 Chinese, and 35,000 Ukrainians, among others. In contrast, immigrants from the EU numbered 129,000, and returning British nationals comprised 84,000. By recent estimates, a staggering 9% of the UK's population are non-UK nationals. That equates to approximately 6 million people, not counting the various illegal immigrants who are unaccounted for. Immigrant and immigrant-descended communities have become increasingly entitled, demanding special rights, privileges and resources paid for by hard-working British taxpayers. Accommodations, including modular homes, have been built for these migrants, but homeless Britons lay starving in the streets. Mainstream media, like the state-run BBC News, regurgitates propaganda in support of mass migration, telling the populace that the UK cannot function without mass immigration. Anyone who disagrees with this narrative is painted as far-right and racist. Let's take a look at some uncensored British perspectives.
We have never done a protest before in our life, so it was all new to us. And the only reason we wanted to do it was to keep our kids and our grandkids safe.
I see.
They put these illegal immigrants in these hotels in our town. They've had no checks done on them whatsoever, and they're allowed to walk our streets. We don't know what to walk in our streets. There's already been reports of them following young girls, women, attacks, and God knows what else.
Britain's relaxed immigration policies have led to an increased frequency of violent crimes throughout the nation. Murderers and rapists roam the streets with impunity, threatening the safety of peaceful British men and women. Anti-immigrant protests are on the rise, with a 13-fold increase in public demonstrations. Many Britons face housing shortages and rising costs of living, while the government devotes billions of pounds in tax money to help foreigners they owe nothing to. Demonstrators are calling for an end to mass migration and criticising the government for prioritising migrants over the needs of British citizens. Uneasiness over immigration in the UK has been simmering below the surface for some time. Over the past few years, much has been written about the way in which anti-immigration attitudes among the British softened significantly after the Brexit referendum. This left some baffled. It was the opposite of what they might have expected, following the victory of a campaign that had been variously described as fueled by racism, fascism, and xenophobia. But in fact, it simply revealed the liberal elite's ignorance of the real dynamics driving the Brexit vote. The reason many people voted for Brexit was to lower immigration. There were both cultural and economic factors affecting this, the result of the very high and sustained immigration that took place under the Blair, Brown, and Cameron governments. However, it was also about sending a message to the country's political establishment. Citizens had been signaling their desire for stricter border controls at every election, only to be ignored. Brexit has allowed the UK to have more control over its immigration policies, including withdrawing from certain international agreements and re-evaluating immigration policy independent of EU influences. However, as a result of Brexit, the source of immigration has also begun to change in profound ways. Net EU immigration has fallen steadily since 2016, while non-EU immigration has increased, with immigrants from countries like India and Zimbabwe increasing by 1,000%. This means that immigration is becoming more culturally, ethnically, and religiously distinctive. On top of this, we have also witnessed a significant increase in the number of migrants and asylum seekers entering the country illegally. Overall, in 2022, a record 46,000 people arrived in the UK, almost 90% of whom were adult men, an astonishing 2,000% increase over pre-pandemic levels. And crucially, a disproportionate number of asylum seekers are being housed in some of the poorest areas of the country, with local councils and residents having no say in the matter. Northeast and Red Wall areas are housing around 10 times as many asylum seekers as Southeast England. All this is driving a renewed stiffening in attitudes towards immigration compared with the past few years. So perhaps it's unsurprising that a majority of Britons think immigration is too high, with 34% strongly agreeing with the statement. Opposition to immigration is particularly high in the country's poorer areas, Midlands, Yorkshire and Northeast England. Are we to believe that 34% of the country is racist? There is very little evidence to support the claim that ingrained xenophobia is to blame. Rather, the country has become incredibly more tolerant and less racist over the past decades, with a recent EU survey ranking the UK as the least racist in the 12 Western European countries surveyed. Yet, even for the most tolerant of Britons, mass immigration had reached the boiling point. In fact, it isn't just the majority of the white working class that wants to see immigration levels reduced, but the majority of respondents of non-white ethnicity as well. More often than not, those who expose themselves to great personal risk to enter the country are from lawless societies. Thus, many Britons are concerned by the sudden arrival of undocumented young males they know little about. And they are right to be concerned, for crime rates are on the rise, with certain demographics contributing disproportionately. Opposition to mass immigration also has to do with the fact that the majority of voters, unlike the globe-trotting cosmopolitan elites, continue to view themselves as national citizens who want to live in a community with some sense of a shared collective identity. National identity remains the strongest form of collective identity around the world. A country's national identity encompasses customs, culture, history, language, religion, and more. The British identity is threatened by these masses of immigrants. Fearing an electoral backlash, the government has recently opened up to the demands of the British people. Rishi Sunak's government announced its Stop the Boats policy, which aims to curb the number of small boats crossing the English Channel. The policy includes several measures intended to deter illegal immigration and cut down the amount of asylum seekers allowed into the country.
We've introduced tough new measures today to help us stop the boats. The new illegal migration bill means that if you come here illegally, you will not be able to stay.
One of the key components is the Illegal Migration Bill, which mandates that anyone arriving in the UK illegally via boats will be detained and subsequently deported to Rwanda. Many of those seeking asylum have dubious claims and are essentially economic migrants who are draining taxpayer coffers. After all, it's always quite suspicious why most of them are healthy working-age men, but rarely women and children. The Illegal Migration Bill aims to change that. Under this bill, asylum claims, human rights claims, and claims based on modern slavery or human trafficking are deemed inadmissible unless compelling circumstances are demonstrated. Claims by nationals of countries considered safe under the bill are automatically invalidated. A side effect of this bill is a growing number of migrants crossing the border from the UK to Ireland in the hope of avoiding deportation to Rwanda. Ireland has seen a steady rise in the number of people applying for asylum. In the first 3 months of this year, 5,200 claims were lodged, over 2,000 more than during the same period last year. While the British and Irish may not agree on much, they both oppose mass immigration. The British government has been surprisingly receptive to the public compared to European Union governments, mostly due to Brexit. Just 2 years ago, plans to house up to 1,500 asylum seekers at a former Royal Air Force base in the north of England were axed in another immigration policy U-turn by Conservative ministers. Then UK Defence Secretary Ben Wallace confirmed that plans to set up the reception centre in the north of Yorkshire have been shelved by the government. The move comes after a legal challenge and strong opposition by local residents and Conservative activists, as well as the two Conservative candidates campaigning to be Prime Minister, among which stood Rishi Sunak. The decision is another blow to the ex-Home Secretary, Priti Patel, who announced the proposals to transfer migrants to a new centre from hotel accommodation, which reportedly costs the taxpayer almost £5 million a day. These changes aim to establish a more controlled and stringent immigration system in the UK, addressing both security concerns and public sentiment regarding illegal immigration. Sunak claims his new migration policy is starting to work, citing a decrease in the number of channel crossings compared to the previous year. It's ultimately up to the people who live in the receiving country to decide how immigration should happen. It's called democracy, and politicians, as the numerous protests demonstrated, disregard it at their own peril. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe. We invite you to leave a comment below to tell us of your opinion on this matter.